Hello, welcome back to anyone who may be returning, which is probably nobody. It has been 4 months since my last upload, which was my Spider-Man web shooter. Check that out right here. 4 months is inexcusable in my opinion. It was really just 4 months of procrastinating and overthinking, and that's not the kind of like creator I want to be. So no more of that. Now that that's out of the way, let's officially get into the video. I'm a very big Marvel fan. Now you could say I'm a bit of a fraud, because I kind of lean a bit more to MCU rather than comics. But if there is one thing that I know that translates perfectly from comics to the MCU, it is that War Machine is a beast. In almost every Marvel movie he was in, he was cooking and clutching up like crazy. Now I say almost every because in Civil War he was getting done just a little bit crazy. But yeah, let's just not talk about Civil War. Now, what makes War Machine such a beast is the insane arsenal that he has equipped to his suit. I mean, he has so many weapons and gadgets and so many iterations of said weapons and gadgets that if I tried to list them all, it would definitely take me a while. But I'd say there are two things in War Machine's arsenal that are like his signature things and that he's almost always guaranteed to have. And those would be his shoulder-mounted minigun and his gauntlets. So yes, for my next project, I've decided to try to make a homemade War Machine gauntlet that actually shoots. Sorry for all the yapping, let's officially get into the project. I wanted to base the design of my gauntlet off of the ones that War Machine had in Iron Man 2. Off of the movie and clips and even pictures on Google, I was kind of having a difficult time seeing exactly what the gauntlets look like. But eventually I was able to find a couple 3D models as well as pictures of the Hot Toys version of the Mark I, which gave me a clear image as to what the gauntlets really look like. And as you can see, Hammer Tech just took one of the weapons that was showcased earlier, which was the FN F2000 Tactical AR, and minimized it and then attached it to his gauntlet. And that reminded me of this toy AR that I got a while ago. Now I could have just taken this and gotten rid of all the extensions and attached it to my arm and called it a day, but very painfully I decided not to do that. I did decide to keep this part of it though and use it in my build. Now I realized that this project had to be broken down into two parts: function and design. Function is how do we make it so that the gauntlet actually has the capabilities of shooting, and design is making it actually look like the gauntlet. I first started with function. Years ago when I was first trying to get into programming, I bought a Raspberry Pi as well as like a lot of assembly kits, and I'll get into those later, but what I want to focus on right now is this kit of motors and battery packs and tires and gears. Basically, you put two AAA batteries in the battery holder and you can use the wires from that to power the motors. And I got inspiration from like a football launcher. Basically, they use two high-powered motors with grips on them spinning in the opposite directions to launch footballs very fast and very far. So to run a test, I soldered together the motors to the battery packs. I made sure to swap the wires on both of them so that they would spin in different directions. And I soldered them together so that I wouldn't have to keep manually holding the wires to the motors. Now the testing had started off a bit rough, I can't lie, but eventually I started to see decent results. Oh my god. Now back to the Raspberry Pi and the kits I was talking about earlier. For those of you who don't know what a Raspberry Pi is, it's basically just a small computer and it can be used for a lot, like programming and gaming and etc. And as for the kit, it's called the Sunfounder kit for those of you that are interested. The kit comes with a lot like a breadboard and resistors and buttons and pre-made modules and stuff like that, so I wanted to use it for this build. Now, seeing as how I have not touched any of this stuff in like years, I had to get a little refresher on everything by doing some projects, and honestly, I had a pretty fun time. Wait, what does that say? Oh, look, hey, it says subscribe. Yeah, you guys should do that. Now, I'm sorry I did a really bad job of documenting all of this, but basically, I set up a system on the breadboard. All it is that if you press the button, the motors go, and if you're not pressing it, the motors stop. For a quick little summary, basically the Raspberry Pi has multiple pins on it, and these pins have different purposes. Some of them are voltage pins, some of them are ground pins, and some of them are GPIO pins. And the GPIO pins, those are the ones that you actually give functions to and program things to. And as you can see in the code, the enablement of the motor, the forward function and backward function are all programmed to a GPIO pin, So is the button. And it stated that if the button is pressed, the motors move forward, and anything else besides that, the motors stop. And that's all in a while loop so that it's always constantly running. I ordered this pack of like 200 silicone ammo balls that I usually use for like Nerf blasters to use as ammo for my Gauntlet. I wanted to see how good the breadboard setup was working, so I took a piece of cardboard and I cut holes into it to hold the motors. I distanced the motors away from each other to a point that the tires on them weren't too close to not let the ammo ball through at all, and weren't too far away to not make contact with the ammo ball. I started off the testing with just one ball, and that went pretty decent. Okay. So I amped it up and did multiple balls at the same time, and that went pretty interestingly. Oh my god. Test number 2. Test number 3. Now, as you can see, every ball is coming out slower than the one before it. That problem came from the motors slowing down after every ball that went through it. And that was probably just a problem because the motors were not placed at the perfect distance. Next, I made like a holder for the motors out of popsicle sticks. I'll be honest, this was like one of the most annoying parts of this whole project. There were just so many iterations and failures and failed ideas and stuff, but eventually I was able to get a good final result. And those black things that you see at the bottom, I 3D printed those. They're meant for the motors to stand on top of, and the reason they're basically just an O is because the shaft of the motor goes throughout the whole motor. And if the part of the shaft at the bottom of the motor makes contact with anything, then the motor won't spin as efficiently as it's supposed to. After making sure that the motors were still working properly and efficiently in the stand that I made for them, I bought back the piece that I took earlier from the toy AR to do even more testing. Yes, this is like the 6th test, honestly. I took a cardboard box and I cut holes into it at where the wires from the motors would be positioned at. And I led the wires of the motors inside the box through those holes where I had the breadboard set up. And after I got the wires connected to the breadboard, I taped down the piece from the toy AR as well as the motors so that nothing moved. And I tried my best to get the motors aligned with the inside of it as best as I possibly could. Before I taped everything down though, I had to put some oil inside of the piece from the toy AR, because since the balls are made of like a rubbery texture, they were not coming out of the nozzle smoothly, and they would like always grip the sides before they came out. But I just put some baby oil in there and we were good. After that, it was time to actually start putting the gauntlet together. I started off by taking a piece of cardboard and removing the liner from one side so that it was easier to bend and fold. After that, I put tape along one side of it and wrapped it around my forearm. And after getting a good fit and making sure it wasn't too tight or too loose, I cut it straight down one side, and along that opening I stapled Velcro to both the sides so I could get my arm in and out of there anytime and didn't have to keep using tape to keep it closed. I also taped up the inside so it was smoother because the ridges from the cardboard were exposed since I moved the liner. Now to start getting the actual shape of the gauntlet, I applied glue to a piece of cardboard, and I got the forearm piece glued onto that cardboard. Then I cut out 2 pieces of cardboard that were the exact same measurements, and those went along the sides of the forearm piece. After the glue dried, I cut off the excess from the cardboard that I glued the forearm piece to. The pieces that go along the side of the forearm piece were a bit loose after drying, so I just connected them with popsicle sticks to give the whole thing a stronger structure. Now to start getting the shooting mechanism and all the excess pieces attached, I glued the piece from the toy AR to the gauntlet. I changed the setup for the motors that launched the balls. I changed it from the balls being launched from in between the middle of the 2 motors to both the motors spinning in the same direction and launching the ball after they push it against something. Now I changed the setup because the setup earlier was nice, but it was very hit or miss. Like you had to get the ball in the exact perfect position for it to actually be launched out. Now, did this new setup actually perform better than that one and work out better? Oh man, anyways, to set up the motors and new launcher system, I started off by taking multiple pieces of cardboard and gluing them together until they were around the same height as the opening in the piece from the toy AR. Then I got that cut in half and glued onto the gauntlet, and I also added 2 pieces of small cardboard onto it as like an aligner for the balls. To one side of the gauntlet, I glued on a whole piece of cardboard, and this cardboard is what would be used to get the motors attached to the gauntlet. Again, I got everything aligned with the opening and the piece from the toy AR as best as I possibly could. I added these 2 pieces of cardboard to start closing off the gauntlet more. To make an ammo holder for the gauntlet, I traced the side of the gauntlet down on a piece of cardboard, and then I extended that tracing and cut it out and made another copy of it. Now I glued one of those onto the gauntlet, and as you can see, I cut down the whole piece of cardboard that I had glued on earlier. On top of the cardboard piece that I had just gotten attached to the gauntlet, I glued on another piece of cardboard that would act as a ramp to guide the balls into the motors. And to finish it off, I added a back wall. And on top of the ramp, I added 2 angled walls that led directly into the motors. Now I realized I had made the ammo box a bit too tall, so I just used a knife and cut it down. On top of the aligners for the balls, I put a tiny piece of cardboard on top and I put a hole in it. And then I put a hole in the gauntlet, and I made those holes so I could put a pin through the whole thing. And that pin was to stop the balls whenever I needed or wanted to. Now to finally complete the whole gauntlet, I started by getting the breadboard stuck to it on the side that the wires from the motors came out of. And then I made a box for the breadboard so that it wasn't just out in the open. After that, I did a try-on test for the whole gauntlet. This was like the 3rd try-on I did. I just didn't include the other ones because they weren't really important. And yeah, I'll say it was starting to come together pretty nice. I will admit, looking at it now, it definitely is pretty boxy. In the future, I'll definitely put more attention and effort into the design of these builds. Now to make it actually look like the gauntlet, this is my first time really painting or spray painting anything, so to those of you who are actual painters out there, I apologize in advance. I coated the whole thing in 2 layers of primer, making sure to let the first layer dry before I started applying the second one. And after it was completely dried, I sanded everything to make sure it was smooth. Those 2 extra pieces you see right there are cover pieces that I made out of cardboard. One of them is a lid to close off the box that I made for the breadboard, and the other is a cover for the exposed popsicle sticks area on the gauntlet. For a final kind of design addition, I took a water bottle and I cut it in half and I glued some parts of it together, and then I got it glued onto the gauntlet. Then I finally spray painted the whole thing. I'd say it went pretty well. It was just kind of awkward at times because I had to like manually cover some areas up that I couldn't cover up with tape, and they were just like weird angles and stuff like that. But yeah, other than that, it came out pretty smoothly, and obviously I don't even have enough experience to gauge how good of a job I did, but I think it came out pretty good. And as for the glove, I just found a template online that I'll link in the description for those of you that are interested. I ordered some thin foam off of Amazon, and I got the template pieces cut out on the foam. I didn't use all the template pieces for the hand, just the finger ones. I glued all of the pieces to form the shapes of the fingers, and for the rest of the hand, I got kind of lazy and I just cut out a circle piece of foam and put a white piece of paper behind it, and that was the repulsor. And then I cut out a random piece of foam for the back of my hand. And with all that, the gauntlet was complete. You know, this is very interesting. It's not broken. All I gotta do is switch one of the motors out, or maybe something went wrong on the breadboard or something, but like, no, just, I'm gonna do something with this project that I should have done months ago, and I'm going to stop, okay? I believe this is a sign from the universe, it's just a sign, okay? I need to stop. Now that I have it done, now that I'm sitting here reflecting back, I know and I'm seeing where I went wrong, what I did wrong, like why this is just bad. And I know what changes need to be made to make it better, you know? Maybe go back to the in-between motor shooting method. Well, shorter barrel, a barrel that is actually more than wide enough to shoot the bullets out rather than like needing baby oil or anything. I think it's still good to put it out to show the process of how it was made, to show the thinking. I think that's still worth it. But this isn't the final. It's just part 1 because this isn't the final result. Right now I should stop and give up on this Mark 1 version, whatever, because it's not doing what it's supposed to. It's not doing what it needs to. I know, disappointing. I'm sorry. But if you somewhat, even the teeniest tiniest bit, enjoyed this video, please subscribe and like. But yeah, that's really it. Everybody take care, please. And yeah, peace.